Okay, fam, welcome back. So today, LTCN and BCHG seem to be having some pretty nice gains. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so LTCN is moving up actually. After 2 green weeks, it's still going up, which is good. If we do close this candle like this, I mean, it is a red candle, but I'm actually quite bullish on it because, again, we would be back above this, the top of this resistance zone here. So in my opinion, that's always a good sign. Next step would be to get above the EMAs and then start pushing up and then eventually get the golden cross. And for the price to start pumping to the moon, I think that's probably going to end up happening next month or maybe in November. We'll see that golden cross and then on the EMAs up here, and then price will moonshot. So MACD is getting closer to a golden cross again every single week that the price moves up. This thing continues to converge on itself to the upside, and eventually, probably maybe after another 3 or 4 weeks, we should see that golden cross, and that will indicate to us that likely these things are about ready to pop off big time for some big parabolic gains. Okay, so RSI, we got the RSI golden cross here, and I don't usually use every single chart for an RSI breakout, but you can kind of see the point here that this thing does appear to be breaking out on the RSI from that downtrend. So it all looks good as far as I'm concerned. The markets as a whole are kind of choppy today. PCE came in slightly below expectations, and I don't know, maybe the markets are kind of having a mixed signal about that. Like, oh, well, on one hand, if it comes in lower than expected, that could be bearish because then the Fed has to slam race to the floor. But on the other hand, that could be bullish because then there's no reason for the Fed to hold off cutting rates, right? I don't know if you guys saw the last FOMC meeting, but Powell said that they were going to be data dependent. So now that PCE has come in lower than expectations, I forget exactly what it was. Let me take a look here. But regardless, now that it's coming lower than expected, there's no real reason for them to try to wait and see to continue cutting rates. I think they should just go ahead and do a 25 or 50 or even a 75 on the next meeting. And again, it's not really an emergency cut. Whether it's an emergency cut depends on whether there's an emergency or not. In this case, I think the economy is just fine. I think that they can cut a little bit more aggressively if they want to, and it's a non-emergency larger rate cut. Okay, so PCE core year over year came in a little bit hotter than expected, which again, to me, that's not really much of a big deal. If I'm being completely honest, I mean, you're basically talking from 1 year ago, this thing's up 0.1%, big whoop, right? Inflation as a whole is actually coming down in general, and that's what matters. So the other thing I suppose here is let's see if I can find it. Where was it? So core PCE index month over month came down lower than expected. So it's kind of a mixed read. Again, I'm not too worried about it. I think it's bullish. So let's go ahead and get into the content here. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that you could probably get in anywhere between 1150 and which is this white trend line, and then the top of this current resistance, roughly about 15. I'd say anywhere there's a good buy. So we're looking at roughly about 25 to 27 and then 54 at the swing high. Above and beyond that, we have 75, 100 to 135, and then roughly about 3 to 400 before hitting all-time highs. For those of you guys that are new to the channel, the all-time highs would be at 510. So 381% move here from basically the white line up to the swing high up there. BCHG starting to get that convergence on the MACD, the bullish convergence. That's always a good sign. This is the third week in a row that BCHG has been up, so that's also a very good sign. During this entire downtrend, we did not see 3 green weeks in a row, but during the uptrend, we did. So, and even before we hit the uptrend, you guys can see that we had like 3 green weeks back here. We had 5 here, and then we had a couple here, but we didn't really have 3 on the way down until we got to this point where we were basically just reversing. This also could be a little tiny inverse head and shoulders pattern. I don't think the target's going to really matter all that much in a few months because, again, BCHG could easily just go back to all-time highs. So I'd be looking anywhere from roughly about 6.25 to maybe up to this top yellow EMA, somewhere around $8. So 6.25 to about $8 as a potential buy zone. So you got 1030 to 1290, 1804 to roughly about 20, and then you have, I'd say, about 24 at that swing high there. Those of you guys that are wondering, the all-time high for BCHG is at just shy of $60. So even at the current levels, you'd be looking at roughly about a 9x. So that's not bad. And that's just to get to all-time highs. If it goes beyond all-time highs, which it probably will, again, these things have premiums that kind of really give these things a nitro to the upside, kind of like the meme coins are very popular. That's the nitro for the meme coins. Wouldn't surprise me if this thing went well beyond 60. So, okay, I measure moves here, roughly about 100%. And then I'll measure out to these next two areas. So next top zone here, 220%, and then roughly about 287%. HZEN. So this thing has finally had a breakout. It took literally 6 months inside this wedge to actually finally get out of it. You'd think this thing would have an explosive move, but no, of course, that they would try to fake you out and make you believe that it's not going anywhere before it actually does. So just because it comes out of the wedge doesn't mean it has to like explode to the upside. That's not always necessarily the case. But regardless, it is a bullish pattern. So in theory, this thing does have a higher probability of going up. So MACD here about ready to get a golden cross. RSI already got one. And the other important thing to note is we are trying to get above these EMAs and the zone. We're getting pretty close, but not quite there yet. So buy zone, basically this green box here, roughly about 350 to 430. If you are more bearish, maybe about 250 to 290. Then we have roughly about 690 to $8 in that zone above head, and then 1040 at that swing high. So just from the bottom of the zone to, let's say, that red zone up there, 126%, and then roughly about 195% respectively. So for those of you guys that are wondering what the all-time high is for HZEN, it's about $30. So you're looking at maybe about like an 8x or so at this point. And again, that candle did show up right at the end of the last bull market. So it's possible the true all-time high, if there was going to be one on last cycle, might have actually been higher than that candle. Okay, so ETCG, I'm kind of looking at basically the bottoms of these candles here. So roughly about 770, 775 to as high as 980 as a potential buy area. For the bears out there, if you think it's going lower, 280 to about 520, I don't think that's going to happen, but to each their own. Zones above head, roughly about 1320 to 1590. And then we have, I'd say 1780 to about $20. Okay, so if I'll just give you guys the measurement from the current price because it's pretty much right about the middle of the zone of the bottom of those candles and the top of the zone. So roughly about 90% and 140%. Again, Ethereum usually kicks off after Bitcoin peaks out. So we may not actually see ETCG and ETH top out until maybe like, it's hard to say exactly. I don't look at Ethereum as much as Bitcoin, but I would say probably somewhere in Q1 of next year. So ETH, roughly about 1860, is, in my opinion, the buy zone. I mean, you could say anywhere between the EMAs and the buy zone, so about 1850 to 2250, depends on how bullish you are. So 2350 to roughly about, I'd call that about 2850 at that zone up there, and then the cup and handle target. You can see the cup and handle here, roughly about 47. So big fat cup and then little handle and boom. So the target should be roughly about 47. And then the all-time high for this one was 68, whereas the all-time high for ETCG was much higher. This one was roughly about $96. Okay, so RSI is starting to get a golden cross here. That's always a good sign. So, and again, this is the weekly time frame. These golden crosses take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to play out. It's not a fast process. You can see the only 2 times we've had it this year is in January and March. And then we're about to have another one right now. So only 3 times this year has this happened. So from that white line to the top of resistance, 50%, and then the cup and handle target up here, roughly about 152. GBAT, big green day. It's actually the most bullish of all of these. which is pretty interesting. But, it has a really, really small market cap, so it probably wouldn't take a whole lot of capital to move it. RSI Golden Cross, MACD is converging up. That's all good. Nice little double bottom bounce off of this support. So support still roughly about 450 to 505. Resistance above head 770 to about $10, and then the all-time high up here. Current all-time high is $32. Now this thing could easily, very easily, especially with as tiny of a market cap as this is, and it's an altcoin, very, very easily go past $32. I really do believe that. So 107 to roughly about 567. Okay, so File G. This one is about to get a double golden cross. The RSI is already crossed. MACD is about to cross. It's getting very, very close. You can see the histogram. As this thing gets smaller, that's usually when we're right on the cusp of getting the green here, as you can see going back in time. So for the bulls, support would be roughly about 35 to 43. For the bears, we're looking at roughly about 450 to 1250. I don't think it gets down to that macro low down there. That's just my opinion. And then the all-time high up here at 400. Again, we have quite a bit of money in Filecoin itself. So we're pretty bullish on the projects. So I'm thinking Filecoin and PhilG could probably easily do like a 15, 20, 30x. I don't see any reason why it couldn't. So 871% move here. I would actually wager that a lot of these trusts will likely do, from their current prices, at least 20 or 30 X's. I don't think that's out of the question. So even something like LTCN and BCHG, if BCHG does a 20x, it's only roughly about double the previous all-time high. If LTCN does a 20x, it's only about, what, $200 underneath the all-time high. So yeah, 20x isn't really all that extreme, honestly. I mean, there's some altcoins that have done like thousands or tens of thousands of X's in a single cycle. So yeah, 20, 30x, in my opinion, is actually probably pretty conservative. So GLIV, 1160 to 15 at that support zone. Again, seeing the same thing here on the MACD, about to curl up to the bull zone. And then we got the golden cross on the RSI. And the all-time high up here, roughly about $80. I don't really have a bear zone for this one because, again, this support has held for months and months and months on end, and 482% on this one. And we're really late in the cycle. Well, I shouldn't say late in the cycle, but we are literally about to start the parabolic phase. In my opinion, if any of these were going to go down to the bear market lows, it probably would have happened before now. I'm just going to say it. That's not a guarantee, but I give it like a 95% probability that we are not going back to the bear market lows before the bull market is over. So 210 to 370 if you're a bear, I suppose. But again, I think the likelihood of that going down that far before the end of the bull cycle probably just not going to happen. Okay, so RSI golden cross, MACD starting to curl up, same thing. We did get a break of the trend line, but of course we're testing the EMAs and resistance. You already know some bears are going to be sitting there, or some position traders getting out of their, taking their money off the table, waiting to either get back in here or do something else. Okay, so 38 to 45 support here, 66 to roughly about 83 at the resistance, and the all-time high at 220. Macro support down here, roughly about, let's say 18 to 22. Again, I don't think we go that low because we've been sitting above that level for almost a full year now and have not come back down below it. So 109% and then roughly about 460% gain. SVOL, so this one's pretty straightforward. Anywhere in the support zone is a good buy in my opinion. So 300 to 350. And then roughly about 590 at the all-time highs. Just measuring from the bottom of the sun, you're looking at roughly about 94% or so. And this is actually the all-time high as of right now. But again, these things can always go to new highs. You can see it went to a new high here, and then another one here, and another one here, and another one here, and so on, so on. For the bears out there, the next level will be roughly about 170 to 200. I did say that was the level I was looking for. It doesn't mean I'm bearish on it. It just means that I thought it was kind of a little expensive compared to other altcoins, which it is. But again, there's good reason for that because a lot of people think there's going to be a spot Solana ETF, and a lot of people think Solana is going to be the ETH killer. I don't think it's going to be. I mean, there's been plenty of ETH contesters out there that have never been able to take out ETH, so highly doubt it. Okay, so GXLM, a little rejection here off the EMAs in this white line. That's not really surprising. That's trading 101. That's usually what happens in the short term. So any of these white lines is a good area to buy. So basically between 14.30, 20, and up to 24. So anywhere between 14 to 24 is a good buy. Bear zone down here, roughly about 490 to 1130. I don't think it goes that low. So you got 53 to about 59 at the resistance, and then 69 for that swing high. So if I just measure from the current price, you're looking at roughly about 215 to 280%. And again, just showing you guys where the all-time high is. It's actually higher than we've been so far in the cycle. So GXLM is still likely to go much higher than that previous swing high back there at 70. So the all-time high from the last cycle was $96. And you can see this was in October. Okay, so Bitcoin's peak was actually in November. So that's literally only 1 month of data from the previous bull run. That's it. So the true all-time high for that cycle could have actually been much higher. So when I tell you guys that the all-time high for GXLM is 96, in reality, if we had seen an entire cycle's worth of data, it probably would have been something like 120, 150, maybe even higher than that. We just can't see it because there's no price action there. Okay, so MACD curling up, RSI golden cross, Mana's looking good. Nice little double bottom in the short term and also potentially the longer term as well. White line for me is going to be support, so roughly about 1050. You got your resistance there at 1780 to about 2040. The all-time high, which is the all-time high of this cycle and the actual all-time high, is $70. Your bear zone, if you're looking for bottom feeder kind of buys here, roughly about $2 to 380. Yeah, you can see the all-time high back here was this wasn't even an all-time high. This thing actually came out during the bear market. So yeah, we've never actually seen what this thing can do until this cycle. So anyways, so you got roughly about 118% and 620%. Zcash still chopping sideways. Again, I consider this to be accumulation, okay? As long as we're not sitting at the all-time highs and chopping sideways, anything underneath that, in my opinion, is accumulation. The lower down it is, like down here in this big area, the better off, right? Because this is where the whales are going to be buying down here at the bear market lows when nobody's looking at this. They're like, let's see, Zcash was, here, let me go ahead and buy this at $2 a share when the previous all-time high was at $40 a share. Well, guess what? If it just goes back to the all-time highs, I'm going to make a juicy 20x. And some of these guys trade in like millions or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. Whales, by definition, are like super uber rich, so they trade huge, absolutely huge size. So these guys would have been buying like $5 million worth down here, or even like maybe 500,000, still a large number. You take 500,000 times 20, that's a $10 million profit, or 9.5 million. So yeah, that's some big volume. It makes sense if you have a lot of money to position at the absolute best possible level that you can get in at. Okay, so 3.25 at that white line, that's what I'm looking at as the support down here, kind of the bear zone, 150 to 280. That's the macro accumulation. This is kind of the micro accumulation, with this level being roughly about 450 to 511 or 510. We'll just call it 510. Nice even round numbers. So $8 to 975 at resistance, and then 10.25 up there at that swing high. So from the white line, we're looking at roughly about 50%, 175%, 195%. And once again, the previous all-time high for Zcash was $40, but then again, it did come out 1 month before the final peak of Bitcoin in the previous cycle and the altcoin market. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.